Hi everyone, how's it going? It's Sean Matson here at the Alliance Biodiversity International and SIAT. We're just about ready to start, so hang in there. I think about 3 minutes. We just have a number of people still joining here right now, so we're just going to let them tune in, and then we'll start really soon. Hope everyone is having a great day, afternoon, and is excited for the session, and thanks for signing up. Thanks for being here. So I'm thinking about 2 more minutes here. We'll get moving. Thanks everyone for joining the official launch of Bean Atlas 2.0. Right, we're just waiting as people connect here. And more folks are coming in all the time, so thank you all for joining. Just about ready to start here. About 1 minute. All right. Okay, I think we're ready to start. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Sean Matson. I'm Global Communications Officer at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and SIAT. Really excited today. We're here to do the launch of Bean Atlas 2.0, which is, it's if you're familiar with the Bean Atlas, it's pretty much the go-to reference guide for beans in Africa, all across the value chain. And we're going to hear a whole lot about that from our experts today who are joining us. As you know, the Bean Atlas was prepared by PABRA, which is the Pan-Africa Bean Research Alliance. And I will quickly introduce our panelists. We have Robin Buruchara, who is a senior advisor to PABRA, Jean-Claude Rubiogo, who is the director of PABRA, Rachel Muthoni, Andrea Heine, long name, easy to pronounce. She's a scientist and co-editor of the Bean Atlas, the second version. Hi there. Andrew Farrow, a spatial analyst at Geographia. And thank you for joining us. It'll be great to hear from you. So what we're going to do today is first run through a series of videos and then have a question and answer period, right? So there's 5 videos. They're not too long. They're all really interesting. They talk about different aspects of the actual Bean Atlas. And just quickly, as the videos are rolling, when you think of questions or something you would like our panelists to ask, please go to slido.com and then put in the code. We'll put this up on the screen right now, if you could. for us, please?
Yes, I'm
Rafa.
going to. Now you see the screen?
Okay, great. So everyone, to submit questions in a fashion that's really helpful for all of us, just go to slido.com, put in the number there, and then you can type in your question. Be very helpful for us if you could say, I would like this question answered by Rachel, or by Robin, or Jean-Claude, Andrew. That would help us a lot, but I'm sure we might have a couple different perspectives from our panelists on those questions. So yes, that's the place to put the questions. That said, we'll still open up the mic toward the end. We should have at least half an hour, perhaps more, for question and answers. So looking forward to that. And just a couple of housekeeping notes. One, if I have internet connections as a moderator, Patricia Onyango, who is our communications officer with PABRA, will be the person who will take over until I can get reconnected, so there's no interruption as far as the flow of the webinar goes. And the session is being recorded, just so you know, so we can share it with everybody afterward and those who couldn't join us. And so let's get going with the first video. Features Rachel, and it's a promotional video you might have seen for the launch of the Bean Atlas.
Do you see the video?
It's to be loading. Thank you, Rachel. That was great. We'll be hearing from Rachel again very soon. For those of you who are just joining us, this webinar is to officially launch the Bean Atlas 2.0. And please find some additional resources in the webinar chat. We'll be putting them up during the course of this webinar. If you have any questions for the upcoming videos, we'll have 4 of them who will speak to different aspects of the Bean Atlas. You can go to slido.com and put in the code 800272. That should be up in the chat as well. And that way we can, once we get to the question and answer period, we will be able to answer your questions. And we should have a fair amount of time to actually do that. So we're looking forward to that. So next up, the video we're featuring Robin, who he's going to address several questions, including what it means for PABRA to have this version of the Bean Atlas, why PABRA's Atlas initiative is a priority, and what the demand for this product is. Over to video by featuring Robin. Thanks.
My name is Robin Buruchara. I'm currently an advisor to PABRA, but I've had an association with PABRA for quite a while, since 1990, starting as a pathologist, but ending it up as director of PABRA. During that period, I've had an involvement in the two bean atlases that we are talking about in this forum. The first bean atlas was actually initiated or came to being in 1998. There was a reason why it was needed, because with the increase and development of bean research in Africa, we needed a one-stop shop where we could have information resources giving different information that were required by research, by scientists, but also other stakeholders working on beans. Now, the effort to develop the first bean atlas was a big collaborative effort done by PABRA partners. It was led by Dr. Charles Wortman, who worked with a number of SEAD scientists, the national programs, specialists in different universities, and assembled information which was to be used by these stakeholders and others. It was a very popular document, very much used, and it was a one-stop place to get information about beans. But then, after about 10 years of its use, there was a review and a survey to try to find out what was the utility or what else was needed to have it improved. Now, it showed that the research that had taken place during that time, there was more information which was now available, but which was not included in that document. The other aspect was that PABRA, having expanded both in the scope of what they were doing, there was more to it that was not included. The areas like new constraints, the areas in seed systems, there were new technologies developed, new varieties released, and more important and interesting, work on nutrition and in markets. In fact, there were efforts to develop a concept of the bean corridor work that linked demand of what was demanded in the market to research. But also another important element was that PABRA had expanded its regional area of focus. There was a new network in West Africa, which was not factored in the first document. Now, because of this, there was also an interest to consider a format, because we had a document which was in print, but which was static. Now, all this information that was available, it wasn't possible to have it easily updated and included for reference. And therefore, there was a thinking that maybe we needed to have a new format, which was dynamic, which could be updated over time. But in considering things, there was also consideration of new technologies in presenting information. There were new methods and of presenting the visualization, developing of maps, and also there were more data which provided more resolutions when you use platforms like Google Maps. Now, because of this, there was the need to see how do we then improve on the format that was on Bean Atlas 1, and then to develop a new version which could be both dynamic but also would have information. And not only to have a new information, but as research continues and more information is generated, how would this be presented so that it's more or less up to date and provided an up-to-date information. And this is really one of the reasons, and some of the major reasons why it was necessary to have the Bean Atlas 2, which is now being launched. My name is Robin Buruchara.
Hi, Robin. Thanks for your insights there. That's great. We'll be looking forward to hearing more from you in the question and answer period. Hopefully, everybody can address the questions through Slido that we got there. Ask panelists your questions, which we'll be getting to very soon. Next up, we have a video by Pabra's director, Jean-Claude Gogo. He will discuss how the new Bean Atlas will be critical to future research at Pabra and the growth of the alliance of Pabra as well.
Jean-Claude Rubiogo. I'm the director of the Pan-African Bean Research Alliance and the leader of the Global Bean Program within Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. My background is on crop improvement, seed systems. I've been working with the bean program and PABRA for the last 18 years. I've been working on beans since 1984. So I'm a bean person. This atlas coincides very well with the PABRA celebrating its 25th anniversary. So this is a good opportunity for us to start celebrating. So this gives us an opportunity to really show what we do, at the same time what we have done for the last 25 years, including Atlas and others as well. This is just a starting point of the 25th anniversary. When it comes to Atlas, again, this is the second edition, the new edition, which fits very well in the new PABRA thinking as well. And then also the current information and the future information system. In the past, you see everything was a paperwork. So the new Atlas, the second edition, fits very well in the new information system, highly dynamic. You can electronic copies, few hard copies, they're also available, but it's an electronic copy which you can easily adjust, so it will allow us to adjust as we go, as we get more information. When it comes linking what the content of the Atlas and PABRA, if you look at it, beans have gone through a changing landscape. It used to be a mere food security crop, subsistence crop, where just farmers were farming for their household. But over years, as a result of research work, the beans changed from that mere subsistence crop to high value, highly nutritious, which as you deliver nutrition, you make cash and business, and to provide other multiple benefits in addition to the food and nutritional security, to create jobs, to create equity, inclusivity. It also create industrialization, to contribute to industrialization. So the Atlas has taken into consideration all these elements, which fits very well with the current PABRA and the future, which is aligning to the bean corridor, because PABRA also, since 2017, we have aligned our research to the bean corridor, which centered around three major hubs, starting from the consumption hub, understanding what people would like to consume as the beans, the demand, and then that helps us to go to the production hub, develop the varieties which consumer demanded, farmer preferred. We also bring in the seed to the communities, agronomic practices which are climate smart. And then once the production is organized, is meeting the demand, the second level of hub, which is distribution, and then which is also linked to the consumption. So this corridor is an investment platform, which again, if you look at the atlas, the way it's formulated, it's along these lines. So it shows that, yes, this is an investment platform from the research point of view, from the private sector point of view. Those who want to invest either in the consumption hubs, that means retail market, processing beans, they can find the information required in the atlas. Those who want to invest in the production, be research, be production systems, they also find what is required in their bean atlas. So it gives them the production constraints, how to overcome them, the disease, pest, the agroecology, the variety suitability. You really find them in this corridor of the production hubs. So if somebody wants to invest in the distribution hub, that does also provide information, an investment case for those who want to invest in the distribution hub. The same with the consumption. So we really take this trust as really fits in the current and the future because it's dynamic. So it will be able to provide opportunity and information to these investors along the value chain. So that's very unique. And we'll also be able to adjust as we go, because that's different from the past atlas, which was paperwork, which was a printed document. Now is digital. It can be adjusted anytime we find any new information, any new requirement, any new request. So along that corridor investment platform. So that's very, very unique of the atlas as well. We also appreciate the contribution of various people who have put their effort, the authors, definitely, effort by Rachel, by Andy, by colleagues in the Alliance, the national programs who owned this document, who owns PABRA, the National Agricultural Research colleagues who provided their time and effort, their government, we really appreciate. Of course, we also appreciate the contribution of the donors, SDC, Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, the Global Affairs Canada have been really very instrumental to get this atlas out and make sure it provides this information. And we can reassure anybody who wants to use it at the university, at the research level, at the investment, at the business, this is the right document to consult and to use. But also we are open to any other request, which again we can accommodate. So thank you for your participation and your attention.
Hello, Jean-Claude. Thanks for your insights. That's great. We're looking forward to hearing more from you very soon here. And for those of you who are just joining us, this is the webinar to launch the second edition of the Bean Atlas. Please go to slido.com and put in any questions you have using the code 800272. After the next couple of videos here, we'll also open up the floor to questions if anybody wants to ask a question that way as well. And it's for those of you who are writing in your questions, please direct them to one of the panelists that we have with us today. It was great to hear from you, Jean-Claude. We're looking forward again to hearing more from you in the question and answer period. Now we're going to hear from Rachel, who is a scientist at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIET, whose work was critical to building a new Bean Atlas, and is co-editor along with Andrew Farrow, who we'll be hearing from soon. Rachel's going to tell us about how she brought together data from 23 different countries that are featured in the Atlas, how stakeholders were involved, and what some of the new features of this atlas are compared to the first edition.
The first version of the atlas was our benchmark. It focused on Eastern and Southern Africa and on 5 topics. Bean production, including cropping systems, was one, bean grain types, bean insects, diseases, and abiotic constraints. This current edition has information and data from Southern, Eastern, and Western Africa. We've added 4 new topics. These are topics on bean seed systems, current and future climate suitability for beans, post-harvest management, and a topic on bean research and development using the network model of PABRA. We've also expanded the source of information and data from 96 bean-producing areas to 176 bean-producing areas. We set out with a target to collect data from 30 African countries. At the end, we finally only worked with 23 African countries. Regarding the method, we used a modified Delphi method of consensus building, where we worked with teams of experts through workshops. And we developed a protocol that we followed in order to ensure consistency amongst the workshops. And we went for local groups with a broad cross-spectrum of expertise. With this method, we acquired information on bean production, cropping systems, seed systems, bean use and marketing, bean grain types and varieties, abiotic and biotic constraints, as well as post-harvest management. We had over 350 expert contributors. Secondly, we sourced data on harvested area and production from FAO statistics and subnational statistics. Thirdly, we used high-resolution spatial data on climate, soils, and elevation to refine and update the existing African bean environment. To assess the impacts of climate change, we used a Maxent model and we compared the current suitability, which at the time was 2014, with suitability in 2030 and 2050. Lastly, we triangulated the data and information and validated with PABRA subject matter specialists. They provided the interpretative narrative we needed, and that became the basis of the current version that you see. Reflecting on the Atlas development process as a whole, the quality of the data is variable. We have most confidence in the bean environments, where we used higher resolution and more recent data than before, as well as the bean harvested area, which is a compilation of data from multiple sources. Much of the data is informed opinion from groups of over 350 expert contributors. During the workshop, we had experts from the extension, farmer organizations, and research institutions, but fewer industry partners like agro-dealers, seed producers, bean processors, and traders. Something that could be added in the future as we look to an update of the Atlas. So worth noting is that the opinion method was more timely, cheaper, and it covered a wide geographic area when compared with other primary data collection methods such as surveys. There are some special data gaps where workshops were unable to be held in PABRA countries, notably the Central African Republic, Angola, South Sudan, as well as North Tanzania, but only for socioeconomic production characteristics. Also, there are some countries that have recently joined PABRA like Mali, Benin, and the Ivory Coast that aren't captured in this version. Thematically, the Atlas is more complete. The only major omission will be average farmer yields and yield potential. This is difficult to assess over large areas with multiple varieties and with large variations between years. Models of bean potential yields is something that could be added into the future version. As I close, the data collected as part of the Bean Atlas is open. It's available in the Harvard Dataverse with persistent identifier and complete metadata. It's also interoperable with common file types like A3 shapefiles and the CSV text, and it is reusable.
Wonderful, Rachel. Thanks for that. It's amazing to see how much has been added to the Bean Atlas between its 2 editions, and we're looking forward to hearing more from you in the question and answer session that'll be coming up right after this next video. This is with Andrew Farrow, who's a spatial analyst at Geographia. He was also co-editor of the Atlas. Andrew's going to address the question. Given the current and future climate situation, which is something that's on everybody's mind and is pretty much affecting everyone across the globe, how does the second version of Atlas contribute to the conversations on climate security, both now and in the future in Africa? Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you for the question. So I think that the second edition of the Bean Atlas of Africa contributes to conversations on climate change and climate variability in 5 important ways. So firstly, the Atlas gives an overview of the current climatic constraints to production. Lack of soil moisture continues to be the most widespread climatic constraint in sub-Saharan Africa. And in the Bean Atlas, we map 3 different types of drought. Drought early in the growing period, mid-season drought, and terminal drought. Version 2 of the Atlas shows that drought is widespread. However, some areas are particularly affected, and these include eastern Kenya, northern Tanzania, and much of Ghana. And apart from drought, we know that heat stress, especially at night, can reduce pollination, and it affects other bean reproductive processes. Now, heat stress wasn't included in the first version of the Atlas, and in version 2 we can see that it's affecting production in diverse areas of sub-Saharan Africa, from Buenza in the Republic of the Congo to central Malawi and to northwest province of South Africa. So the second way in which the second version of the Bean Atlas affects this conversation is that we now include models of changes in suitability for beans looking forward, so looking over the next 10 to 20 years. Now, our models of suitability for beans suggest that temperature is more important, it's a more important driver in the location of beans than rainfall. Climatic projections indicate that by 2030 there will no longer be any areas which are very suitable for beans, but there will still be many areas which are suitable, such as much of Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, the Kenyan highlands, and much of Cameroon. By 2050, areas which are suitable will have reduced even further due to climate change. Now, the third way in which the Bean Atlas will contribute to conversations on climate change is through our mapping of bean commercialization and the bean corridors. So any changes in the suitability and in production of beans is going to have a knock-on impact on all the other players in the bean corridor and in the bean value chain. These could be traders, aggregators, processors, and eventually consumers as well. So if we can combine our projections of climate change, our assessments of changes in production on the bean corridors, we have a good idea of seeing what changes need to be made to ensure that consumers can keep on getting good quantity and quantity of beans as well. So moving on to the fourth contribution of the new version of the Bean Atlas to conversations on climate change and security. So I think this is via the tools and the media that we're using to deliver our data and analysis in this second version. So tools such as web mapping, from which you can use to query the Bean Atlas. Now, these weren't available in 1998 when the first version of the Bean Atlas was produced. Viewing the Bean Atlas on a browser means that you don't have to have GIS software, which you would have had to have had beforehand. And it also means you don't need the same extensive GIS skills that you would have needed beforehand. Similarly, our maps and our analysis have benefited from access to higher resolution data than were available before. So data such as for soils, for climate, and for elevation. And these have improved our bean production maps in their precision and in their accuracy. And finally, I think the fifth way that the second version of the Bean Atlas can contribute to conversations on climate change and security is that it gives an indication of some of the adaptations that smallholder farmers, extension systems, and bean researchers can implement to deal with a changing climate. So, for instance, the atlas tracks the release and adoption of improved bean varieties, some of which, such as the variety KAT Bean 9, were bred for drought tolerance. Also, the atlas can show us how practices which allow smallholder farmers to cope with climate change and extremes are spreading throughout Africa. Practices like intercropping and agroforestry systems. So we can see where they've been adopted, and we can track the success and see if they'll be relevant for other locations, other similar locations. And maybe the last resort for bean production, looking far into the future, would be to seek new production areas, perhaps in higher elevation areas such as the Ethiopian highlands. And the atlas shows which areas will still be suitable in 20, 30 years, giving the agricultural systems time to respond.
Andrew, thanks. Great insight there. I really appreciate that. Okay, well, now we're moving on to our question and answer session. Could I ask Jean-Claude, Robin, Rachel, and Andrew to please turn on your camera so everybody can see you as you question from everyone. Hi, everyone. Well, these are our panelists, and thanks for all your videos. That was great. Again, please, if you can, it would be wonderful if you put your questions in at slido.com. The number is 800-272. So it's really easy. Just enter it into your browser, and we can do that. We'll also have some questions here in the chat. Well, so I think we'll just go with the first one here. Is this is for anybody who wants to answer. Thinking about target audiences for the Bean Atlas. Students, researchers, NGOs, investors, farmers, traders, or all of them? Over to you.
Who is this question for? All of us?
For anyone who would like to answer, I don't know. Jean-Claude, would you like to talk about the different target audiences for the Bean Atlas?
Right. Yeah. Thanks, moderator. Thanks, Sean. Yeah. Good morning or good afternoon, or depending of which corner you are in. Yeah. As I said in the video, PABRA embarked on Bean corridor approach since 2015, which links the demand-led breeding and research to the users. So we see really various users of this Bean Atlas, all the way from the researchers, all the way to the investors, what we call really investors, either in the private sector, in the public sector, and also the researchers, the universities, the users who want to look at the bean varieties, suitability maps. So the could really range is like all the members of PABRA, which range from the researchers to the users as well. So everybody has, as I say, initially we didn't have a seed, we didn't have a market, we didn't have a nutrition, but you can really see now all these are present in the current atlas, the second edition, and then linking with the Read Bean corridor, that provides us room for many users to find the document very useful.
Excellent, thank you. Would anyone else on our panel like to make a comment? Perhaps a new group that is specifically targeted or more included than, say, compared to the first edition of the Atlas?
I think, yeah, I think especially researchers outside of Africa, people who, like myself, are kind of like spatial analysts working on global studies or regional studies. It's a very useful source. I use it in my own work now. Just getting information on just basic knowledge on where beans are being produced is very, very useful. It's useful for other crops as well, but having a source where you can go to, you know the metadata about it, it's very useful in further studies and further modeling.
Excellent, thanks. Andrew, now that we've got your mic open, there's a question here for you about we don't believe you mentioned anything about future pest and disease outbreaks that could be associated with climate change. So I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
I'll try. Yeah, I think it's very difficult. It's a difficult subject, linking climate change with pest and disease outbreaks. So I'll probably try and involve Robin as well, since he's the kind of bean pathologist. The atlas, as with drought, as with heat, we have the maps on the current constraints to bean production due to pests and diseases. So as with drought and heat, the current atlas gives you kind of a baseline indication as to where those different pests and diseases are going to be a problem. Linking those outbreaks to climate and climate change is more difficult. I think that's why it's not there explicitly in the atlas. But we do know that there are certain pests and diseases which do have links to climatic phenomena. So think of desert locusts, think of root rots in beans, and so I think what you could do is take the base information from the atlas and then look at how some of those phenomena are changing from other sources. So if you look at the IPCC assessment, you see that the minimum temperature is likely to rise in most of Africa. So we know this is going to have an impact. Similarly, the kind of heavy rainfall days, so things which might be associated with root rots, they're also projected to increase over the next 20, 30, 50 years as well. So I think you can take what's in the bean atlas and link it with other sources, and that will give you some insights on the potential impacts on pests and diseases. So I don't know if Robin or JC has some other thoughts on this.
No, if I can add information to that, is that not only that you can get that picture from the expected changes in climate, and as you know, diseases are influenced by weather and by the cultivation and some of the varieties grown. So that's an element that you can link up and even project. But also what we find is that because of the varieties that we grow, you get incidences or occurrence of diseases. And with the diseases, you get variation in organisms which cause, and is useful to map out that picture so that then it helps breeders when they develop varieties which are tolerant to those diseases. And what we see is that over time and in different places, studies are going on in universities, in different research institutions, and this information can then be built into the information we have now to give a sense of the diversity of the organisms which cause different diseases or of the variation in pests. So that the dynamism of this version then helps us to update that picture, that anybody wants to get a sense of how is the organism varied, where can it grow. It helps then breeders to target the varieties that are resistant or useful in particular areas. Thank you.
That's great, thanks. JC, is there anything you'd like to add to that? I think your microphone might be muted.
Thanks, Sean. What I was saying, that in addition to pest and disease, increasingly we are finding farmers and other people really interested in short duration material because of also climate change. The length of rains have reduced. So people are looking for this kind of variety, which are 60, 65 days, but also it makes sense at the investment level because you plant in 60 days, you come back to harvest. So you have shortened your hunger period, you have shortened your money period to get cash. So in addition to disease and pests, we're also looking on really how do we get these varieties? Probably they're released in Kenya. What other areas, for instance, if there is in Kenya, what other countries of similar agroecology, this variety can be very useful. So again, I think with the information we do have now, we can really have that information, and rather than doing another testing using the harmonization seed policies across country, we can shorten the process of testing and the release using these climate resilient materials, and then making sure that people reduce their hunger period and funds and cash as well at the household level and business.
Okay, thanks, and thank you to everybody for putting in the questions. And we have quite a few now, so looking forward to answering those. I see a few that are related, so I'll try to combine them to the extent that it's possible. And please continue to post your questions. And in a little bit here, we can open it up for anybody who would like to post a question directly to one of our panelists. I think perhaps we could have seen a couple of questions here about what we could do to further develop the atlas. I mean, what could we be thinking about adding now in the future? I mean, my understanding is it's a product because it's digital. It can be sort of, we can do add-ons and little bits here and there. So I was wondering if we could talk about anybody on the panel who would like to go and discuss that. Maybe Rachel, maybe you have a idea for what would be some of the next avenues that the atlas could take. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll take that, and then anyone else in the group can add to that. So yeah, you're right. It's a digital version that just makes it so much easier compared to the first version in terms of updating and adding on. You have heard from JC's video that this atlas provides information for multiple actors in the value chain. That means it's of interest to us to ensure that it's constantly updated. Now, in the process of putting together the data for this particular version, I mentioned in my video that we had 350 contributors in the 23 countries, and we sourced all manner of data that we could get our hands on. Now, what was very obvious at that time is that we had more representatives in terms of the sources of data from some particular experts, from the research, from the technicians, from people that had knowledge on constraints, and mainly from the production side, as well as on environments and bean environments. But the numbers that we had, that we sourced data for information such as seed, business, meaning people from the industry, that team was less. We didn't have a bigger number of people from that group. And the reason is a lot of the work that we've done on markets has really been in the recent past, in the last 5 or so years. And so it makes sense as we think about updating the atlas to go and target these groups and really get information on what's happening, what is happening in the work that we're doing on markets, seed markets, grain markets, markets on bean products. There's a lot that is happening recently in that area, as well as nutrition. And another area that we could look at is these emerging pests and diseases that have come up in the last few years. So that's where the direction is going to be. And a lot of this, of course, depends on financing, because that plays a key role in terms of having another the updates going on, as well as building our technical expertise internally to be able to do this continuously. Now, we don't have to wait so many years to do this. This is something that we can do as we move on, added onto our ongoing data collection within the project, the PABRA project. We have several projects in there. There's a lot of efforts within the teams to capture progressively information from project implemented activities. And this, we can easily mainstream the data collection and move theme by theme, group by group, country by country, depending on where there's more work. So that's what we're thinking about in terms of updating.
Rachel, thanks. Sounds great. Was anybody else on the panel like to add to that? Andrew, I see you, your hand there.
Yeah, I would maybe add, in thinking about data collection, as we saw from the first Bean Atlas to the second Bean Atlas, there was a kind of almost a revolution in the amount of information which became available. And I would say, since we collected the information for this version and now and looking forward as well, we're seeing more and more data becoming available. So this can be remotely sensed data. There are more and more satellites going up all the time. And I think these would help us to be able to better discriminate where beans are being grown and something about the characteristics of those areas as well. I think not only the remotely sensed data, but some aspects of citizen science are also developing. We hear about big data a lot as well. So there are these other data collection exercises which we could take advantage of. So I think that's something which one could think about for updating this in the future as well.
Maybe to add on that, Sean, if you allow me, we also, I think Rachel and Andy talked about that the digital form is easy to update, definitely, but also we have increasingly a very good database across all the disciplines we do have, from breeding, the germoplasm, the site characterization, where we do our testing, easy to look at kind of similar agroecology. We have seed system data from the production, where the seed is produced. GIS referenced the seed producers base, where they produce the materials, the availability of seed by season. We have, as the indicated market, that database is updated within the PABRA database as well. And also we are looking on, as I said, we have a corridor approach now. Everybody, our members are really very conversant. We are digitalizing it now. We're in the process of starting that digitalization. We are developing with a private company here in Nairobi to see if they can help us to get the digital digitalization of the corridors from input to output, in such a way that people can aggregate their demand in terms of seed. They can also aggregate their demand in terms of grain. So, and then that can be easily mapped up very easily because of georeference, kind of uberization. So PABRA being a partnership, we are entering to other partnership with other digital companies to get to the scale and to see how this is happening. So there's really something we can already make it bigger and bigger.
Maybe just a small addition is that there are some partners and colleagues in some institutions who had looked at the first version and were interested in doing something similar in a different crop. And with the new version, I think there is consideration, particularly to focus on the value chain, elements, and considering to kind of adapt a similar approach in what they are doing, and there is that process going on now.
Great, thanks everyone, and thanks to everyone who's with us here for questions. We have a whole bunch here. Please go into Slido and vote on the ones that you like the best, and we'll take those in order of priority. I'm seeing the next one is about the Sustainable Development Goals, ones which are related to zero poverty, zero hunger, and general health and well-being, right? So the question is, how will the Bean Atlas contribute to that, or what? I was wondering if you maybe provide some insight on these important goals that we're trying to meet globally by 2030.
Okay.
Rachel, go ahead. Thanks.
Well, I'm thinking that the discussion that we just listened to from Andy on his video spoke to this question in terms of how does the Bean Atlas contribute to discussions on resilience and climate. I think there's insights on there that we could look to, and also from JC as well. The Bean Atlas is a resource. It provides insights on what has been. One can easily use it to compare with the previous atlas and see what has changed in various elements. That atlas has information on production side as well as the distribution side when you think about markets, and there's an element of nutrition in there and the bean use, as well as on constraints. And now, when you look at this, it really depends on what one is interested in identifying. Given that it's a resource, it's a reference document that can inform that. But added to that, actors on the bean value chain, the bean corridors can look into that to get different information if one wants information on markets. So with reference to the SDG, we are concerned about understanding what's happening in terms of poverty, in terms of climate change, climate aspects, in terms of social and economic changes, of course, contributing to the different SDGs. And to me, if we look at this as a resource, it really fits in, and again, a resource that can inform what's happening in Africa and how beans can contribute to that. So I guess from an angle of it being a resource, there's much that one can source from it.
That's great, thanks.
Over to you. Yeah.
Rachel, I'm seeing there was another question here, and we've spoken to about this a little bit. It was, it says the data was collected in 2014, and is it still current? I mean, I understand everything is being updated, and it's quite active in that regard. I was wondering if you could speak to that for a minute or two.
That's a good question. We were very, very much aware of this element. We were very aware that it was taking us a bit of time to do it. And therefore, when it came to us releasing it, we had a process that we launched, which we call, and I mentioned in my talk, the whole aspect of triangulation. This document in its manuscript sense had to go back to the PABRA subject matter specialists. And the request to them was, look at your particular theme and update it. Look at everything that we've picked from the countries. And I should say that the collection did not quite end in 2014. It was up until 2017. And the reason was we did not run all the 23 countries at a go. We had this happen over a period of time. So some of the country data really was coming to us around 2016 and 2015. But a lot of what happened in 2017 was the element of triangulation, cross-referencing with what exists within the particular theme to make sure that what really goes out was updated. Now, there's a level to which we could not update, and I would want Andy to take this point further. But in terms of sense-making and narratives and description, that element was covered within the chapter by the thematic leads who led the individual chapters. Maybe Andy could speak a little bit to the element of where we were not able to quite update.
Well, I think the different themes were kind of how can I say this? I think the production data, well, in terms of accuracy, there was some data which was more accurate, let's say, than others. Some which we had other data sources for, which we were able to kind of review afterwards, and others we were not. So on the production side, that's where we did make great use of other sources, statistical sources, FAO stats, etc., data which were coming from the countries. And that was where we had most combination of the different data sources. Some of the other themes we relied entirely on the expert panels. But I think what's important here is that, yeah, there has been a gap between when it's being released and when some of the data were collected. But we're quite clear in the production. We're saying, yeah, this is a kind of a time-stamped reference. We show when the data were collected, and we say that, yeah, this is relevant for this period in time, recognizing that things are changing all the time. This is fairly common in other data sources as well. They're time-stamped, and you know things are changing before the particular data set is published. So I think that's as best as we can do, you know, recognizing that things are changing all the time.
Great, thanks. There's a question here. It says it's about intersectional and a nutritional lens of the atlas. I mean, I understand some of that's in there in terms of, you know, different stakeholders across the value chains being involved. But I was wondering if one of our panelists could maybe expand a little bit on that next question you have there.
Definitely. We are open to receiving suggestions on what else needs to be added, and here is one of those. We did mention that our work on nutrition is really ramping up now. So definitely, as we look at updating this atlas, given that it's digital, making it very easy to update, we will definitely be looking at the nutrition, and here's one of those cases. Thank you very much for the suggestion.
Yeah, maybe to add on that, I think that's a good point. Again, this is a relatively new field compared to breeding or other element we have in PABRA. But the way now, but if we could probably now, next thing is looking on the nutritional maps, and that can guide our interventions in terms of variety dissemination, in terms of now, for a couple of years, that's 5 years, we started looking on various bean products, not just beans we boil, but people are making pre-cooked beans, bean-based flour and porridge. So there are several good products which are coming up with entrepreneurs, private sector entrepreneurs who are members of PABRA. And I think this also will not only looking on the rural areas, we're looking also on urban, because the urban poor relies on beans, but cooking them takes time. So if you can get other products, so if we're able to map up these rural and urban nutrition levels, and that helps us to target, to even guide the private sector and say, well, if you're really looking on where do you sell your products, where do you make your business? So we just have to look at it to open our thinking beyond just research for our publication, but research for private sector investment, so that we can guide them. Where do they put their investment? Where do the malnutrition levels are? Where the actors? So that's really what we are aiming at as well in the years to come. Yeah.
I'll just add one other thing, going back to the kind of the micronutrients in the beans as well. We did try in this version to collect information on iron and zinc levels in the varieties, but I think when we first tried to collect this information, it was very difficult to get this information from many of the partners. And it could be that the technology has improved in the kind of intervening years, and so getting access to this information is easier than it was before. And so this is something which could be perhaps improved in future versions as well.
Maybe just also to add that relatively the high iron and zinc varieties in terms of their release and the spread is variable, and some what released in some countries, you know, much earlier, but quite a number is more recent. So the picture should be improving, you know, in the last few years, or has improved the last few years, and probably in terms of update, is an element that could be included and show the distribution of those biofortified bean varieties. Somebody raised also a question in terms of whether this is an element that's going to be by default integrated in the varieties. I think the process is considered in some programs either as new varieties, to have new varieties with high iron and zinc, or in some programs improvement with those that are existing, and also giving choice, particularly depending on the different preferences and needs in different countries. But is an element that is growing over time, and maybe the future edition should be able to give this picture more clearly. Thank you.
That's great, thanks. There's one question that caught my attention was about integration of more integration of the private sector into the atlas. What do you expect in terms of being able to add that sort of capacity or those sorts of inputs into the atlas as it continues to grow?
Yeah, definitely a good point. With growth and also seeing growth that is happening within PABRA, we're expanding our work with the private sector, the industries, processing companies for value-added bean products, as well as understanding several things. For example, how small medium enterprises are best facilitated to trade when they are linked with these industry partners. And this is not an element that we captured because it's just emerging within PABRA in the last 5 or less years, actually really drumming up in the last 3 years. So definitely this is a group that we're going to be sourcing their input. We have them already in our databases as partners in the implementation process of different projects within PABRA, and definitely we'll be reaching out to them to do this, to bring in their contribution. Maybe another thing is to also look to them and see how they would use the atlas itself and what type of information would they be interested in seeing featured, and therefore turning the approach a little bit differently and responding more towards demand. That's also something we could look into.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe again to add to what Rachel is saying, we also, as we said, we have 3 hubs for within the corridor. So the consumption, the distribution, and the production. So all these actors within, they need information. So again, that's, and the members of these hubs, the consumption hub is driven by the traders, so the traders need to know where they source their materials. So now if you have information on production hubs with a certain type of beans, yellow or cablanquette or any other, so that helps them to know where to source the materials. Of course, some know, but sometimes there is a drought in a certain geographies. They need supply from others. So we are also in the process of building business atlas for business people, which we have already started gathering information, the profile of various actors within the value chain across various countries, and their profiles will be shared in such a way that if a trader is looking for where to source the supply, he can connect with others as well. So all that information will be very useful. And since we have adopted the food system approach, so in food system you cannot do without private sector, and the private sector need information. So this is a document which probably either them directly or people who work with them or people who need to generate evidence for their business and for anything they need as well. So, but also we are keen to listen to what they need in order to improve. Yeah.
That's great, thanks. Soon we'll be taking some questions for anybody who would like to speak, so just let us know. I had one more question, and I think there was a couple of questions like that in the Slido there. We won't be able to get to everything, but what we'll do afterwards is we'll compile the questions and see if we can provide some feedback in a follow-up email to everyone who signed up and who was here. We still have another 20 minutes or so, but we would like to give the opportunity to people to voice their questions if they have them. Just one more for Rachel and for anybody else who would like to answer this one. So the initial target was 30 countries, and so 23 are in there right now. What is or what needs to be done for us to be able to include more countries in the atlas, again, as it continues to grow?
Yeah, several factors led to that. Yes, I say we had the intention of going out to all 30 countries, but we only ended up with 23. This has a lot to do with who was on the ground that we could work with. That was very, very important, because remember, we optimized the opportunity to use PABRA and the whole network was key. So we needed to have people on the ground. And therefore, countries that we had more connections with, where we had national teams and other partners that we could easily interact with and bring this to fruition, really, that was a driver. The second thing is, of course, costs and finances. So at some point, we had to say, this is what we have, and this is what we have to go by, and stick with that. What was the other third thing that played a role in terms of not having 23? I mean, 30.
Security as well was an issue.
Yeah, security. Yeah, some of the places we couldn't access, because of security. So that was another thing. But really, the big one was having contacts on the ground, being able to access data, secondary data from those countries that we could easily say, this is something we can go by in terms of data, in terms of contacts on the ground. Remember, for all these countries, we had to go there. And having source information from secondary sources, we had to go there and have these forums with national partners. And I really commend national partners that are on this call. Without them, we would not have moved. And so that was really a big driver. And of course, security. Andy? And did I miss anything? You can add.
I think you've got them all here.
Yeah.
But perhaps to emphasize why we needed to go there as well, because there was some facilitation involved in ensuring that the kind of the data collection was as consistent as possible across the country. So this is why we had a resource person from PABRA there in all of the workshops to ensure that people understood the questions and that the data was collected in a consistent way.
Yeah. And obviously, the other thing is, these were countries where PABRA was already working in. Again, the umbrella of the PABRA network. If a country is not within the PABRA network, it just wouldn't have been on this list. That was another way of just screening them out. But as we move forward, again, it's still going to be the same. Where do we see work on the ground? Where do we see emerging work? Like we've mentioned, markets, pests, diseases, and now nutrition. Where is this happening? Because obviously we want information that can be consumed or that is being demanded. So there needs to be a critical mass on the ground and an interest from the demand side. Okay.
Wonderful, thanks. So now, if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to answer a question, there's a way to put up your hand, or you can just ask in the chat here for us to open up your microphone. In the meantime, were there any other maybe address that were in the Slido there while we wait for a question to come in here?
Well, the question on the bottom, it said the question is, it was mentioned that bean coverage is reducing as we approach 2050. Could you give examples of some climate adaptation techniques? I think one thing we should say is not that the bean coverage area is necessarily going to reduce. It's just that the suitability based on the current distribution of beans is projected to change. So it's a bit difficult to understand. But essentially, the way that the models worked is looking where beans are currently being produced. Now, of course, new varieties are coming online all the time, and it could be that the actual coverage doesn't change at all because the practices and the technologies will allow beans to adapt to those new climates as well. So I think it's important to say that just because the suitability may be changing based on current distribution, it doesn't mean that beans will disappear completely, but they would probably have to adapt in order to adapt to those new climates. But maybe Jean-Claude or has some instances of what those adaptations are.
We mentioned about it again during our what our breeders are doing, breeding for short cooking time. I mean, sorry, for short duration, and so you can really see the demand is increasing which takes consideration the duration of the crop season. So we're also looking for yield stability, because sometimes it's not just the drought or the heavy rainfall. Sometimes they all days together. So you need a stable material with the trees which has really a good yield stability. That's what the farmers are looking for. Disease and pest, as we indicated in the early discussions. So because the new pest or even the severity of the existing pests, so when new strains are coming, so we need also to make sure that the new varieties we have goes to farmers as fast as possible, the variety turnover. I remember when we started with the wider impact, 2004, the varieties could go up to 15 years before they are used. And we made a progress. 2015, we reduced to 5, from more than 10 to 5 years. When the varieties release was taken 5 years, 2015 average. Now we are at 3 years. So by 2020, we find that the variety release, the maximum it takes to get out to farmers is 3 years. So we are even looking for the same time you release a variety, then that year is used. So that's kind of a variety reduction between release and use, and the variety turnover for the new variety which are climate resilient will help maybe to expand even the area under beans, because they will have appropriate technologies and varieties to deal with that situation. We also have agronomic practices. We're also looking on other technologies and other methodology to keep soil moisture, to also increase the nutrients, the organic matter in the soils. So these are really various technology which allow people and incentivize the farmer. I think the most important in all this is to invest, to help farmer to invest. Because if farmers don't see benefit or they don't get genetic gain in their hands, then they're not incentivized to invest. So linking them with either market or nutrition to incentivize them will also pull their investment in the technologies. So there are several combinations which we are working on in order to get the farmer continue as interested in the beans as a source of income and their nutrition as well for their cropping systems.
Good to see everyone, thanks. If you have a question, there's a little hand like that on your toolbar there. Please hit it and let us know if you have a question.
Well, maybe Sean, I could, while we're waiting for that question, there was a question earlier on in the slide on what we observed in terms of women's responsibility in bean production. I think it warrants mention that in the last in the first edition of the Atlas, women were reported as the primary decision makers and labor providers for bean production. In the second edition, we observed changes with the greater bean commercialization, where men are more involved in the bean value chain. I think this has become a constant statement now. We also observed the impact of seasonal migration, which in some countries left women in charge of the production and specifically bean production. Then we also observed bean production replacing commercial crops. For example, in Malawi, I recall we saw beans replacing tobacco. And in most countries of East Africa, beans replacing coffee. So, and of course, this had implications in terms of women's role changing in bean production in comparison from one atlas and the next.
Yeah, no, those are very important points. Thank you, Rachel. I see there's a couple of questions that have been written in additionally now. Let me just take a quick look at this. If anybody was having sound issues, please we will send the recording of this later. It's likely a connection issue because I think we checked with our technical team and everything is going fine. Let's see here. There were a couple things in terms of just technical stuff. Maybe quickly, are there some people wondering if there's going to be a hard copy or what that's like, and how to actually access the digital version. If you could maybe speak very quickly to those just technical issues, how to access the atlas. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was another really good question there about what is going to be done in terms of really disseminating that this atlas exists and is there and can be used by people. So what can we do in terms of making this available and more accessible to anybody who's interested in it, and also make people aware that this very important tool exists?
Okay, I can speak to that, and anyone else in the group, Andy, Robin, JC, can add to it. Currently, we have, of course, we set out with the objective to have this in a digital version, and that really was driving the agenda. So we have a link where one can access the digital version of this atlas. As was mentioned by Andy, you don't need GIS softwares to do this. You can easily go in there, and it's interactive, meaning that you can move around, and depending on where you place the icon, you're able to visually see data coming up. And that is available, and there's a link to that. I believe after this call, one of the things that will happen in a week, so less than a week's time, is to communicate to everybody where all these materials are available. So regarding the digital, there's a link that one can use to access it. Secondly, we also have the PDF available. We made some copies. These are available in Nairobi, and I know that for those that are familiar with the PABRA team, Patricia has been ramping up the effort to send out copies to some of our national partners, and that's ongoing. But really, one can also access the PDF and run a print of the specific areas of interest that's available, and there's a link to that. So for those that have access and for those that can consume it in that form, it's there. For students, there's also a link to the whole database that we put together, which is the basis for what we have, and therefore one can go in there and use that data to do several other things that one would want to do, expand the work and research in the countries of interest. But we are very aware that we do have another group of people that may not be able to necessarily consume it in that form, and with I keep saying funds, but with access to funds, one of the things we want to do is to see how snapshots of this atlas can be available in small flyers, in bulletins, and made available to the different user groups that we mentioned here. That's still in the works, but it's doable.
Great, thank you. I'm seeing 2 hands raised. I believe Paul Kamani was first. Raphael, I was wondering if you could maybe unmute Paul here so we could hear the question.
Go ahead, Paul. I unmute your microphone.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to, I don't know whether, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
First of all, I would like to thank the PABRA team for this big job. This was a big effort and to put a second edition. My question was that the previous edition, the first edition, focused on dry beans. But we are now aware that there are new other types of beans, the snap beans, the runner beans, that are growing, taking a bigger market proportion. Is there any information on this in the atlas? Thank you.
I can talk to that. Yes, the simple answer, Paul, is that yes, there is. There are some pages of the atlas that has considered those two runner beans and snap beans, and actually there are some maps showing the importance of this and some of the distribution. But as you say, this is an ongoing and increasing importance. And as much information as new information comes in, definitely the update should even bring the picture much more clearer. But yes, that is already included in the current version.
Robin, thank you. I see one more hand up. Ndeyabuba Meyenge. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Rafa, could we open up his her microphone?
Yeah, but in the moment the microphone is disabilitated for Bona. I don't know the reason. Maybe it's connected through internet or maybe by cell phone, but it's not appear the microphone. Sorry.
Okay. It's, yeah. All right. So it looks like we might not be able to take your question there. Was there anybody else who would like to take advantage of the last few minutes we have here for maybe one last question for the panel? Just please go ahead and put up your hands there. And if not, I would just like to thank everyone for joining us. We were unable to get to all the questions in the Slido. We will try to get those together in the coming weeks or two or less. And for everyone who registered and everybody who joined us today, we'll send you the recording and some additional information about how to access the atlas, how to use it, and all the web resources that we have that are available for the atlas. All right, so I was wondering, would any of our panelists like to have make a closing statement? 30 seconds each. Robin, maybe we'll start with you.
I think comparing and I think having witnessed both versions, I think what we have now is really an improved version, which in terms of updating should be able to be more updated easily and integrate new information and addressing some of the challenges raised. I think we should have a product that could be used in a practical way by the wide range of stakeholders listed in one of our previous comments. Thank you.
Good. Robin, thank you. We'll just go in order of presenters. JC, maybe 30 seconds just to have some closing thoughts.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Sean. Just to appreciate everybody's work and the participant today and the people who made this atlas really Rachel, Andy, and others, and the donors, as we said. But also, I'm thinking that this is a very useful investment guide as we adopt research for investment, not just development, but really for investment from the farmer to all the private sector along the value chain. This is really a guide for you, an investor, of course, with the other researchers to support it, but mainly is for that investment for other people as well. We really appreciate it and wanted to make it very useful and even upgrade it as we go. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent, JC. Thank you. Rachel.
Yes, mine is really a message of gratitude. This work would not have been possible without the presence and the active involvement of our national partners, and really I want to commend them. Sorry. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, the national partners. Thanks to our donors. They had faith in us. We were able to year to year, no matter how long it took. They kept it going on the work plan, and we're grateful to them for that. To everybody on this webinar, thank you very much for taking the time. Most of all, would like for you to use this resource really, and to communicate widely to your your contacts on its availability, those that are in the research, those that are in the industry, and make it available. Share with them the URLs and the links and the products so that they can use it. And obviously, we want to hear from you. Just one sentence saying what else you would like to see moving forward. That would be incredible, because as you've had, there's a digital version to this, and we'll be looking to see how we can update that. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, well, you've kind of, all three previous panelists have thanked all the same people I would like to have thanked. I would like to, say, I agree with Rachel. I think, I hope people do use it. I use it in my other work already, and I wish we had the same resources, the same kind of information for other crops in Africa as well, because I think it's a really, really good resource. And yeah, I implore you to use it and tell us how it could be improved in the future.
Wonderful, Andrew. Thank you, and thanks to everyone who joined us here. And you'll hear from us soon. Please, our doors are always open. Our emails, if you have any more questions or insights or comments about the Bean Atlas or any of the work that PABR is doing, we're more than happy to answer your questions, take your calls, answer your emails. And thanks again for joining us, and being in touch very soon with everybody who registered and who everybody attended today. Have a great evening, afternoon, morning. Thanks again, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.